Hello everyone and welcome to Season 5 of Crave Arts Presents The Future of Film, featuring intimate interviews with the best emerging filmmakers from around the world. My name is Tom Oliva and I am co-founder and executive director of Crave Arts and the All-American High School Film Festival, dedicated to discovering, showcasing, and uniting the next generation of visual storytellers and content creators. In October of 2024, we celebrated our 12th annual festival. 12 years in, and our community is thriving, a testament to the power of believing in the arts and the emerging artists that share their stories with us. The collective spirit of our organization, our community, and all of our year-round initiatives is rooted in a shared passion. A passion to breathe life into stories, to collaborate with others who share your vision, and to create content at the highest level. Content with the ability to move viewers emotionally, to inspire with unprecedented style and craft, and to impact real change. Some quick updates from the All-American Bulletin Board as we gear up for our 13th annual festival in New York City. We are busy preparing for the festival, which will take place this October 17th to 19th in New York City, and submissions are open via Film Freeway with the final deadline on June 30th. Head over to hsfilmfest.com to get the latest news and updates about the 2025 festival. You can save on early bird tickets, book your discounted rooms at the Hilton Midtown Hotel, and check out our downloadable 2025 budget guide, planning guides, and posters, because you know it's never too early to begin planning your all-American adventure. And if you plan on attending the Fest in New York City, we highly recommend competing in our film invitational competitions, the world's premier on-site student filmmaking competitions in New York City from October 15th to 17th. We offer a variety of real-world production experiences for student filmmakers and production programs, your chance to crew up and produce a short film in just 10 weeks. Registration opens in May. For anyone looking for new gear, be sure to visit our preferred partner discounts page under the resources tab on our website to check out awesome discounts on a variety of gear and software. And teachers, if you're looking for a great way to boost your curriculum and elevate and inspire your students, check out our video production resource community and roadshow. 2 terrific in-person or remote opportunities featuring lesson plans and interactive presentations based on our library of exemplary student films. More information can be found at hsfilmfest.com under our Education tab. Today's guest, Colin Dowse, from Carmel, California, is an alumni from 2020 to 2022, who, I must admit, holds a very special place in my heart. In 2020, while grappling with the unprecedented challenges of the pandemic lockdown, Colin wrote, directed, and starred in a film titled Smile. His submission went on to win our 2020 Best Overall Film Award and Best VFX, and would have probably won Best Sound Mixing too if we offered an award for that. Colin produced the film almost single-handedly. He didn't really have a choice considering the circumstances, and obviously based on the accolades, it's a remarkable production worthy of recognition on many levels. But something else caught our attention about Colin. He was a freshman. As in, he made this film during the pandemic as a 9th grader. Cue the comments from our judges. Wait. This kid made this during freshman year? Our minds were blown. Smile presents an ambitious production and story concept. The futuristic, dystopian premise requires a hefty dose of VFX and nuanced direction and cinematography, which in turn requires equal support from the editing, sound design, and score. Essentially, if this film is going to feel authentic and remain engaging, it will take a village, harmoniously coordinated into something rather seamless. A village inhabited, might I remind you, by one Colin Dowse, the freshman. So yeah, it was pretty much inevitable that we would take a liking to young Colin, the pandemic prodigy. Revisiting Smile again before today's conversation was a treat. No doubt fueled by my fortune of getting to know Colin quite well over the years, watching as the young man and the young artist matured, working with him during a difficult existential period when he seriously considered taking his talents in a different direction. Watching the film again years later with increased perspective, I couldn't help recognizing the irony. The experience of the film and my understanding of Colin's journey just makes me smile. So what is Smile about? Is it a condemnation of the proliferation of our pill-popping culture, particularly its impact on our youth? Is it a sly judgment of our increased isolation at the mercy of technology and thus a proposal for the power of nature to provide all the fuel we need? The smile pill that the protagonist relies on comes with the tagline, "The natural way to find joy." And he lives in a black and white solitary world that offers hope and color only when he escapes to and welcomes in the natural world. Or is it an exploration of the complexities of the teenage subconscious, the overwhelming impact of a quarantine, and a quest to somehow still find a glimmer of hope and even fulfillment? And how does this heavy examination of the human condition produce equal parts pulsing energy and patient, thoughtful contemplation? How does this cinematic and thematic recipe ultimately make me smile? Well, folks, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Colin gives us a lot to unpack, including his 2021 film Out of My Mind, winner of Best Editing, and his 2022 Best Music Video nominee, Blush. And I'm certain a whole lot more. Clearly, I am thrilled to be joined all the way from Valencia, Spain, by Mr. Colin Dowse. Hey, Colin. Sorry, I just went on and on there. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Tom. I'm so excited to be here. Such a pleasure to be on the podcast. So thank you for that intro.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. Okay, we're going to get the conversation flowing with a little segment we call This or That. In this quick reply exercise, I'm going to provide two options, and you share in the best possible way that you can which one you prefer.
Wonderful.
All right, here we go. You probably know by now which one we always start with. We're going to go pizza or pasta.
Pizza.
Ditto.
I'm a pizza guy.
You know, nothing against pasta, but
No.
Ice cream or cake?
Ice cream.
Same. Okay. All right. If you were going to have cake, what kind would it be?
Well, okay, here's red velvet. I always ask for that on my birthday, and my mom has always made that for me since I was a kid. But if I were to ask for ice cream, probably cookies and cream. But there are good ice cream cakes, so there's a middle.
By any chance, have you heard of this place? I was just in Texas doing a road show, and there's a store that only sells bundt cakes. Nothing bundt cake.
Nothing bundt cakes. Yeah, they have those in California. There's one like in my hometown.
I didn't try it. I probably should have.
It's wonderful.
But I'm an ice cream guy, so okay. All right, here we go. Calling or texting?
Calling. I cannot have a text conversation.
City or country?
Country.
Interesting. West Coast or East Coast?
West Coast.
We haven't converted you yet? Okay. All right.
No.
No. Neat and tidy or total mess?
Total mess.
All right, we'll go a little deeper here. Innovation or tradition?
Innovation.
Whisper or shout?
Wow. Shout.
Mac or PC?
Mac.
It's a boy.
Day one.
All right. Light mode or dark mode?
Dark mode.
Wide angle or close up?
Ooh. Wide angle.
I had a feeling. Okay. Sticking with this, fantasy or realism?
I think realism.
I like that. Drama or comedy?
Drama. But like that's a close one. That I could be either one. But I think drama.
All right. Yeah, you had to pick. All right. And finally, film school or DIY?
Film school.
All right. Well, we're going to hear all about that decision. Let's dive into all things Colin Dowse. Full transparency, everyone. I've been in touch with Colin quite a lot. He's actually working with us as an intern on our content team, even while studying abroad. You may have seen the awesome web banner that he created for our website. Thank you for that, Colin. So I know you're in Spain. What time is it there?
It's just turning 8 p.m., so I believe it's a 6-hour difference from you guys.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Thanks for canceling all of your plans for tonight and sitting down with me. Tell us what you're up to there.
Yeah, so I'm studying at the Berklee College of Music just for the semester for the abroad program, and I'm doing an emphasis in guitar and vocals. So a little bit of a break from film. But that doesn't mean I'm not working on films here. So while my classes I'm actually doing a music video class. a history of Spanish film class, which is really interesting. And then probably my favorite is recording and mixing. So I'm learning a little bit more. It's more on the music production side, but I am learning a lot about sound design, which I don't know too much about technically, and learning how to use Pro Tools and stuff. So mainly that, and then whenever I'm not in class, trying to travel almost every weekend. Made it a bajillion different places, including Morocco, London, Ireland, and then all places all over Spain. So it's been wonderful.
It's amazing. I'm equal parts happy for you and jealous of you. So I take all of the mental memories that you can, so that you can share with me all of these experiences when we have more time for that. I mean, I do have to ask though, like, couldn't you learn all of this music stuff in the States? Why'd you have to go all the way to Spain?
So it was kind of a fluke even getting into this program. Like, yes, I could, because Berklee College of Music its Boston campus is near Emerson College, which is where I go to school for film. It's like half a mile down the road. So you can take classes there, but Emerson offered a partnership program, and I thought it looked the coolest. I mean, if you see photos of where the Berklee campus is, it's this giant like science arts like structure building. There's an opera house. There's Europe's biggest aquarium down there. It looks like phenomenal. I know Guardians of the Galaxy was filmed there. So it's super futuristic looking. I was like, this looks much cooler than all the others. So I was like, why the hell not? I'll go and study music there.
How has the experience studying abroad been? I mean, I imagine that you go into something like this with tons of excitement, but also some trepidation, right? I mean, you're going to a different country. Mm-hmm. Do you know anyone there? Did you go just like completely by yourself?
I kind of went just by myself, which was daunting as someone who is definitely an omnivore and is not like, the most like eager to want to make new friends. That's definitely like a challenge for me. So luckily I knew like mutual friends who were coming here, but there's 5 or so people from Emerson who are in the program, and I didn't really know them at all, and have become very close to them. But yeah, that was definitely a big thing that's made this semester kind of tough, is just totally uprooting my social and work life and just kind of finding that balance. But there's just serendipity in trying and exploring new things. And honestly, I think I'm happiest every weekend I go somewhere else, because you just get again and again that rush of being somewhere new. And I've totally gotten the travel bug from that. And yeah, and Valencia, the weather, I must say, is much, much nicer than Boston and the whole East Coast. So
I think you made a good decision taking the winter to go to Spain.
For sure.
Well done, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
On a daily basis, is it quite similar? I mean, outside of the excursions on the weekends, which sound absolutely incredible, and I'm sure are informing both, your musical creativity and your film creativity in so many ways, which is priceless. But on a day-to-day basis, is it a lot like just being at school but in a different place, or like, what do you do every day? Do you go to classes, and what do you do in these classes?
Yeah, it's pretty darn similar. The only difference would be that I'm taking 6 to 7 courses in total per week, whereas at Emerson I'd be taking 3 to 4. And so the days are a little more packed, but I do have it's a less frequent class schedule. It's just I have more courses to do, so that's a totally different for me. But I know that's kind of normal for a lot of schools to have. You attend 1 day a week, and you have up 6 to 7 courses or so.
Okay.
So on a daily basis, it's pretty darn normal. It's surprising how normal it feels. I think the more I travel, I discover these differences, but then also realize, like, especially in a developed country and city like Valencia, we're just college students, getting by day to day. And honestly, when I'm not traveling, I kind of forget that I'm out of the country.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Maybe with one exception, and that was my next question. How has the language barrier been? I don't know. How is your Spanish?
It's not great, Tom. I think.
It's probably better than mine. So.
Maybe, yeah. I think it's improved for sure. But the good thing is that a lot of the people here do speak English, and I think I have gotten to the point where I can have like a very basic conversation with most and ask for, you know, any goods I might need. My girlfriend and I went and got massages the other day, and I was able to have a full-on talk. I was telling her where I was from, how I was doing, and that was like, I don't get a lot of chances to practice that, I think, just because I'm kind of stuck in this incredibly busy environment. All my classes are in English, so it's I kind of have to force myself to go out there and really try, because most people will see me and be like, oh, he's American. Right. I'm going to talk to him in English. So I kind of have to try to get out of my comfort zone to learn, as would anyone.
Well, perhaps, an appropriate time to show that you're not just a gringo, that you're actually able to communicate when someone has the ability to, put you in pain as you're on the massage table. So sounds like a good opportunity, and good for you for, taking advantage of that and doing your best to sort of, adapt to the language as much as possible. And I think you're probably being humble. I think you're probably able to communicate pretty well at this point. And what an added bonus! Like, think about all these languages you're speaking with the music and film.
I know.
All right, so I know that you're attending film school at Emerson. Why was Emerson the school that you decided to attend?
Yeah, so it was a long journey to get to Emerson. I think you kind of knew about some of the ideas I was having. Like pre-college application season, and I think I was pretty dead set on Southern California, LA. I mean, Chapman, LMU, USC, they all were like, oh, these are the big film schools, and since I'm from California, like, it made sense for me to go down there. And I actually did study at USC for a summer semester, which was a really good experience. And so I was like, man, this is what I'm born to do. And then out of nowhere, I think one of my friends recommended Emerson to me, and I hadn't heard of it before, I decided, okay, I'll throw it into the application list. Started looking into it. Oh, it has some really cool abroad programs. It's a very different film school. But what really did it for me was the Daniels, who made Everything Everywhere All at Once. When I remember watching the Oscars, and I was so obviously the film was mind blowing, but the way that the perspective they had on kind of the future of cinema and their approach to filmmaking, and I heard they said that they were from Emerson, which I didn't know up until I watched it, and just kind of did a rabbit hole into what the school is all about. And I really think in a way they capture that kind of off-kilter creative, rebellious creative essence in a way that the school gave to them. So I really was like, okay, there's something going on here. This school doesn't have a lot of huge alumni. Paul Thomas Anderson was there for maybe a semester, so that's big, but it's not huge yet, like maybe some of the other more prestigious schools. But going there, I'm like, wow, I couldn't have gone anywhere else, because it's a school that is so focused on letting the students lead their own journeys. It's very hands-off. The classes are not super intensive. You kind of have to go out and find clubs and friends who are making movies, and there's an abundance of that once you get into the kind of production community at Emerson. I think you'll find there's always work to be done, and what that allows you to do is start at a very young age, whereas I think at some film schools they won't let you actually direct your own film till maybe you're a junior or something like that, whereas at Emerson I was able to pitch and direct a film freshman year, which is
shocker. Colin makes a film as a freshman. That's awesome, and I thank you for that context. I also didn't realize that they attended Emerson until you just revealed it. So kind of fascinating, and what a cool path to sort of recognize that maybe this school was the right fit for you. Why film school at all? I just got back from Texas. I was doing a road show down there at a high school, and it's one of the questions I get everywhere I go. Like, do you think I should go to film school, or should I just start freelancing? And it's obviously like, I don't have an answer. I don't know, have an answer specifically for you, but I do try to provide some perspective on both paths. Why was film school, the direction that you decided you wanted to take?
Right. So there was some I think my parents always wanted me to attend a 4-year university no matter what. So that was kind of just out of the question. Like I was probably gonna end up going no matter what I wanted to do. But I think I also just, I was really looking forward to having a new college experience. And honestly, by the time I was a senior, I was like, I've been kind of doing the film stuff for a while, and I've made connections to the point where, I'm starting to see people go off and kind of make their own way, especially through social media. And I was very inspired by that. And I was like, shoot, why am I not doing that? Like, I don't need to be, spending all this tuition money going and studying there. But I think ultimately it's just like, it's a time of your life rather than just, connections. And I think for me, if I had been attending any other film school, it honestly may have been a step backward because I would have been having to relearn a lot of what I had already gone into. But with Emerson, it's like, I'll be doing my basic cinematography and basic writing courses like that, which is, stuff that I was brushing up on in high school through my video classes there and my own experiences. But at Emerson, they have all this equipment for you. They have just a huge army of people who are creating. And I just was like, I just didn't feel like I was ready to go off into the world. And I still felt like, excuse me, no I was missing a lot of kind of social and developmental experiences that I could only have at a 4-year university. So
yeah, no, and I think that's a really mature perspective, and also maybe the opposite is true as well. You just wanted to be young and at college and have some of those social experiences that you kind of only get there. And it's funny that you say that, because it's also part of the answer that I like to give people is, if you think that college is something you might want to do, you probably should do it like sooner than later out of high school.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be 25 or whatever and then try it. And whereas the other part, you're going to get a chance to do no matter what when you graduate. And maybe you go for a year and maybe you realize it's not for me and I'm just going to go into the world and DIY it. And that's fine too. But I think I've met a lot of people, especially in this industry, who didn't go to school. And I do sense some regret, because you never know what you didn't try. And so it sounds like, that you chose the right path. This is what I wanted to ask you. You're a Northern California guy. Carmel is up north. Is there a benefit to also kind of leaving behind all of the comforts and understanding of home and going all the way to the East Coast to a city like Boston, which has a reputation of being a phenomenal college town? Can you talk to me a little bit about, how that has also added to the experience and the learning process?
Totally. I think that's, anyone who's from Carmel would tell you that they're just so ready to get out of there. It's one of the most beautiful places in the country, I must say. And it's like, why would you want to leave that? But at the same time, there's just so much of a bubble and kind of a stagnation that you're going to kind of be trapped in if you don't leave. Mm-hmm. And I think, my friends who a lot of whom were going down to LA and maybe up north a little more towards Davis area, they, it is a change, but it's also, you're kind of being able to go home on the weekends, and you do kind of still feel a sense of familiarity. Whereas I think like going all the way to Boston, I almost felt like creatively that was such a rush for me. Like it was very, very stimulating to kind of start from scratch. And also out of like any school I felt like I could have gone to, I think Boston is so great for college students. It's almost like New York light. It's a kind of more condensed version, more chillax version, if you will, of New York that kind of allows for, it's not a super overwhelming environment. Like if I had gone from, small town to New York, I'd be like, oh, what's going on? There's just so much, but I think Boston was the perfect size. That's also still, a big culture shock and kind of a big difference. So I think anyone will tell you, leaving home and going that far is, it's always going to be a good experience. And I think I knew like whether or not I liked the school, and I've totally exceeded my expectations, but whether or not I liked the school, it was going to be an experience. And even though I've kind of decided now, I'd love to move back home afterwards, I can say that I lived on the East Coast for 4 years, so it's an experience.
Yeah. And then, of course, you got to this place and out of your comfort zone, and then you took it to another level and went and studied abroad. So kudos to you for taking all of those risks and understanding the benefits that they can provide. So you talked about it exceeding your expectations at Emerson, and what a great endorsement. I mean, that's what I would want my kids to say, right? If I'm paying tuition and they're going to a place, I'd want them to say, this has just exceeded my expectations. This is an awesome experience. Is there like a favorite class or assignment thus far that stands out to you? I always like to ask that question because, again, if I'm a listener to this podcast and I'm in high school, I want to know like the nitty gritty. I want to know like what really happens at college on that education side, and what kinds of things are you being asked to do? And I know it's different there, so it's fine if your response is something very different, but is there like a specific thing that stands out, an assignment or a class?
Yeah, sure. So I think my favorite was a class called Making Monsters, which was a horror class. And we go from learning about H.P. Lovecraft all the way to watching Jordan Peele movies. And I think that was and it had such an eccentric teacher who was doing that. And I was just so passionate about it. And I'm like a modest horror fan, but that was just such a cool experience because that class was like technically my liberal arts requirement. That wasn't even for my major, which was crazy. So what's cool at Emerson is you're really bypassing a lot of the math and the sciences, which is really not my thing, and especially like history and the social studies, which I just never excelled at in high school. And going straight to Emerson, which is a private arts college, you get to kind of jump straight into introductory film courses and stuff like that, and there's a lot of really unique classes, and I always like to tell people about that one.
Cool. It sounds amazing. I'm consistently jealous when I talk to people, and if I could go back, I'd go back in a second. I love being a student. Speaking of going back, let's take a big step back and discuss your experiences that got you to this point. When did you first start making movies, and why?
So that one is kind of a difficult question because I think I started having a fascination with movies because of my dad way back when I was probably 8, 9, or 10 years old. It's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly. My dad just has such a love for stories, and he works in software, and what a lot of what he does is kind of take data from users and turn that into pitchable stories and ideas. And so he's always been a huge sci-fi fan. I remember very vividly him, like, he kept telling me about 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I was like, Dad, I don't know what that is. It sounds scary. And he's like lured me into the room, and he had me sit down, and I was like, what's going on, Dad? And there's just a black screen, like the opening of the movie. He's just like, Colin, just enjoy. And he pressed play, and I was like, okay. So it was definitely him that from a young age was instilling that. And then I think whenever I had a school project that allowed me to do some sort of video essay. I remember doing a project and he showed me how to use a green screen because he had to use it for his job. And so I took that and I just had such a blast with that. And I think from there became my obsession with visual effects. I remember getting this like super thick book that I still look at every time I go home because I think it's so fun, which is like the history of VFX, and it has every Best Visual Effects Oscar winner from over the years. And I would just pour over that. Like I would memorize everything. I was so fascinated by how it was done back in the day. And then I think that just led to me teaching myself After Effects, which was at a very young age. I want to say 4th grade, which is when I first got a copy of it. And I made a short film where I believe I had a shoe, and it was called The Big Shoe, and the shoe just started growing, and it got really massive, and it squashes my town. And then I just used clips from a bunch of disaster movies of stuff blowing up and all that. And I think that was probably the first one. And then from there, the first one I made when I moved to Carmel in like, I want to say 2014 was a video of me getting struck by lightning and exploding. And that, it was stuff like that where I just love VFX. There was no like screenplay. There was no, idea beforehand. It was just like fun. I want to see what I can make.
Yeah, you used your love of VFX to then. You had no choice but to create a story around it, but you kind of went the opposite direction. Instead of the story and then adding VFX, you were like, well, I'm starting with the VFX and then I'll figure out a way to tell a story.
Totally. So I think that's really, I've never thought of it that way, but kind of getting to reflect on the early films that I was doing, it's almost like I figured out, I can clone myself. I'll make a movie about where there's a bunch of clones of me, or I can draw on the screen. I'll make a film where my drawing comes to life and starts battling me or something like that. And so you're totally right. I think my love for visual effects kind of kickstarted that.
And it's funny because you just gave me a great segue. You may have even already answered my next question, but the question is, how did your early experiences help prepare you for such an ambitious project like Smile? This is, you were in ninth grade. I can't say that enough. And what's funny about it is we didn't even realize at first how young you were. Like, we watched the film completely blindly. We judged it. We had our feelings about it. And then later realized, wait a minute, this thing that's rising to the top here it was made by a ninth grader. Is there any other insight that you can provide about how, that early work led to something sort of, much more complex?
Yeah. So I think there was obviously when you are doing a lot of films with visual effects, there's a big lean into sci-fi. And I think when I was first developing the ideas for the film, and I want to say in 8th grade, even before I got to high school, I kind of had this idea of this person who was like in an apartment, and he was kind of stuck in this loop and he was interacting with the house, and the house had like, I'm thinking Back to the Future too, where it prints out like the messages and stuff, and there's stuff on the TV screens, and you can actually do like voice activation with all the lights. And so I think I just had this kind of image. It's crazy that I still remember, but I just remember walking around and having that first scene of the movie kind of mapped out in my head. And then somehow Wicked Games by Chris Isaak was the soundtrack to that. And I was just starting to get into classic rock, which is still my favorite. And I think that song, it just had this melancholy feeling that was just like, okay, I don't know, it's someone who's trapped. But I just don't think I really realized what it was at the time. And it took a while for it to even become the full film. But yeah, I think in leading up to Smile, I think the big jump from what would have been my last film to Smile was I was really getting obsessed with lighting and sound and stuff. And I remember like being at summer camp, and I would go into the bathroom and watch like videos about lighting, because I was like, I don't want to be here. I want to go back. And I remember building a dolly out of PVC pipes and skateboard wheels and being like, okay, that's what I was doing the summer beforehand. So the summer was almost like the leading up to shooting the film, just because I was wanting to get more and more complex with each step of the way. And I think every film I made up to that point, had more and greater VFX. So yeah.
So this doesn't just happen. Like, Smile doesn't just come out of nowhere, and obviously that would be impossible. But it's really interesting for me. I don't think of all the times we've talked, and I don't think I ever knew that you were sort of fascinated in all the practical applications that help make a film like Smile possible. And then, bam, you're thrust into a pandemic, and everything's locked down, and you only really have yourself, and I think your dad and your brother to a minimal extent whenever you needed someone to hold something or whatever. But it's so clearly an independent project. You get that sense watching it that this was really legitimately made by one person with such a passion for storytelling and all of these flourishes that you add to it. And it's great for me to know that there's duct tape behind the scenes, and that there's a little boy in summer camp going, I don't want to go to the bonfire. I want to watch this lighting tutorial. And then, bam, it pays off. And that's so awesome. And I'm so glad that you gave the gift to us and that we were smart enough to recognize it. I heaped some pretty big praise on Smile in my introduction. Can you tell us just a little bit more about how you managed to produce an award-winning film at such a young age?
I mean, yeah, it's really a kind of a marvel to me as well, reflecting back on, what my mental space was and what actually was driving me to make that film. But obviously, I think COVID was a really good time for creators. I think selfishly, I had a really nice COVID, just because
Right.
it was kind of the
Right.
perfect, the perfect time of like, I get to just be at home, and nothing's too stressful. So I kind of have this, environment where I'm getting to create all the time. And I remember.
I also, by the way, just sorry to interrupt, but I also I understand COVID guilt because, look, I mean, it clearly was a very difficult time for so many people. It's one of my favorite times I've ever had with my family, because we didn't have anywhere else to go and we had each other. And man, I treasure that year, or that time, when it was just us and we had to be creative, and I think it was like the closest we've ever been. So anyway, I'm sorry, but I completely understand that. But it's special that you weren't just a lethargic teenager, going through, the motions. You decided to really delve into your passion.
Yeah, and I think it was kind of almost like a hideaway for me where there was really not much going on. I remember not being a very social kid, for numerous reasons that I might talk about a little bit later, kind of. But I remember like just having loads and loads of this free time, and my ambition kind of just got bigger and bigger because there was no screenplay for Smile. There was that, like I was saying, there was that opening scene, and then I think I just had like a rough idea of where it was going, but if I recall correctly, I think I was just kind of shooting as I went along, and piecing the scenes together, and then as I was going, that just got more and more ambitious just because I had, the time to do it. And I remember, I actually think the black and white and color aspect didn't come in until I was editing it. I don't think I had that in mind, just because I was like, oh, I need a way for him to get lured into the forest and run up the hill and everything is beautiful. And then I was like, oh, I was figuring out how to play with the saturation, and so that it just kind of turned into that. So it's almost like the creator's dream to have an environment like that where you have a very loving and supportive family who's feeding you, keeping you warm and safe, but then you live in this environment when, I was very lucky to grow up where I did, where there was lots of nature that was inspiring me and surrounding me, that I wanted to capture. And I think it just built from there. And then I think it all came down to the edit, really. If I recall, the full cut was probably half an hour. And I wish I had more of that footage or those scenes. I think there were like whole VFX stuff I did that I just had to scrap because of the 20-minute deadline. And I remember getting it down to, I think, 20 minutes 45 seconds, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna speed up the film. So it was just like the whole story almost was created because of the restrictions of time, in the edit, and that made me have an appreciation for how much the edit ends in ultimation becomes the final film.
And this was so clearly then not a traditional filmmaking process. This was like which also is to your credit though, because somehow you were able to tap into these larger thematic implications. Even if you were building it on the fly, and so much of the storytelling aspect came out in the edit, the depth is there. And were you kind of like realizing that as you were making it, like maybe I'm onto something a little bit bigger here?
I don't know. I think
you were what, 15, 14? So maybe
Maybe. I think it's like, honestly, it's a time I treasure a lot and think about, but it's hard to know what I was thinking about back then. I just remember being really, really happy. I was getting a kick out of every second. I think I must have realized, I think there are a couple moments in the edit when I was like, wow. I remember adding, I found this royalty free, it was like a full folk track that I put at the very end of the film. And just kind of, I didn't realize like what the song was about. It was called Shimmer No Waves, which is a song I still listen to this day. And I remember really thinking about what the song meant, and it was almost like enjoying the silence of a moment, enjoying the beauty. And it's almost like I didn't realize like that how those would gel together. And I remember getting very emotional when I first put that final scene together, and still do to this day if I go back and look at it. So there are definitely a couple moments.
Here's the cool thing about like what I'm realizing when you're talking about it is VFX, a huge inspiration for you, led you down a path where you're telling, complete stories just to exercise this passion of yours. But what I love about Smile is, as dominant at times as the VFX are, and as polished as they are for someone so young, they're not overdone. They're an accent to a character's journey and not the star of the show, right? Were you conscious of that, or you had no idea because you were so young and just learning how to be a storyteller on the fly?
I think so. I think I mean, ultimately, especially as I've, grown as a filmmaker, I've kind of learned that while I do enjoy sci-fi, I think more so than that, I enjoy the realism of things. And I think the second half of the film is really just kind of shots in nature and him soaking up all the color. And so I think I was probably conscious that there's definitely limitations, or I think I had probably more ambitious shots that I wasn't able to do. But I think that ultimately I knew that I wanted to also show off where I lived and this beautiful realization that the character was having. And that can't be aided by visual effects.
I love it. And the secret is that by not overdoing it, we want more of it. And that's what you want in any good film, is that you want your audience to say, I want to watch more of this, not less, right? This isn't like just some CGI world. This is just the right accents of VFX to make things authentic and to entice us into saying, wow, I want to see where that tube goes. It's one of my favorite parts of the film, and a very sophisticated thing that somehow is just innate in your storytelling that gets you to a much deeper place. So how has your process evolved, right? You made Smile, and then I can't even imagine, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You make this film as such a young man, and then where do you go from there? Because you win the big award, and it's like, okay, do I make another Smile? How have you evolved, and what are the other films that I mentioned at the beginning in the intro? How are they a reflection of your growth from Smile, or just a desire to try something else?
Totally. So I think there was definitely an expectation of, what's going to come next, which I think any creative person, should feel. I think it's a healthy amount of stress. And I definitely was. I remember being pretty pressed for a while, because I think for the first time now, I got a couple of my friends together, and it was like, now I have to communicate my ideas, and I also have to kind of learn to write, and kind of get all my ideas down on paper. And that proved to be the hardest part, was how can I even, formulate the thing before it goes into any sort of production. So because it's not just you, because when you're doing it just you, it's right. Like, man, I can piece this thing together. Like, but now you actually have to communicate your ideas to other people in order to have them collaborate with you. Okay. Yeah. So there, I mean, as I think that's any, coming of age that any filmmaker should go through and will end up going through, because you can't just be all loosey-goosey. And so I think learning, the basics of screenwriting, and my friend Jerry, who co-wrote the film with me, we definitely went through a lot of growth trying to learning about the beats of a story. And I remember learning about Save the Cat, and kind of looking back on Smile and realizing like, oh, this is, the midpoint of the film. This is kind of this is when the hero, is brought out of the comfort zone, and he starts to go on his journey. And this is this is the dark night of the soul, or whatever. And you
did all of these things completely clueless of it. And then, so you're storytelling path is completely nonlinear here, and now you're rewinding and learning things that you got lucky and sort of happened the first go around. And by the way, we're talking about Out of My Mind, right? Your second film.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for clarifying. So
of course.
we were learning a lot about, where I think honestly to a frustrating point where each story beat was going. And even after that, I realized I hate that approach. Like, it's good to kind of think about it like, okay, the page count is around the halfway point. We should be getting into the, when stuff kind of gets slumped. But then at the same time, like, I don't know, that works for a lot of people. And I think writing that film, that was definitely the hardest, one of the hardest writing projects I ever have done, just because
forcing yourself into the formula.
I was forced into the formula, and even though the film, doesn't feel very traditional, and I think that was a huge learning process. But then also, for me, learning that that's just not how I like writing. And I think what changed after that is there's this one, not often do I get super inspired by some random quote that I see online or somewhere, but I believe it was Jordan Peele, and he said something like, when you're writing a screenplay, think about it as putting sand into a sandbox, then you just go back later and you build castles out of it. And that just, something in my mind just clicked when I heard that, because I think I was so obsessed with like, okay, how do we get, each story beat along the way, that I was second guessing my writing every moment. I think that's a very common thing for a writer to experience, is like, oh, they're not happy with what just came out. Like, I'm going to, reassess and maybe lose some confidence, lose some steam. When in reality, like, it's not going to be great when it first comes out. Like, there's a flow state that you hope to achieve that is it's so hard to get into, and it frustrates me. But when it's there, you kind of just have to get it out and then edit, shape
it later. Yeah.
Totally.
I love that. What a great quote. Yeah, I've never heard that. So are you what's your relationship like with Smile versus Out of My Mind? Are you more proud of Out of My Mind in some ways, or I'm just curious? They're very different. And obviously we're going to have links to these films in the description so people can check out, your growth from one to the next. I don't know. Is it obviously Out of My Mind was more challenging in some ways. Does that make it more rewarding in some ways as well?
I think so. I think I remember feeling a lot more proud by the end of it, because for the first time I wasn't just judging my work based off of the product of the film. I also had such an amazing time with my best friends creating it, and also I was very proud of how I was able to kind of manage a team. Like, obviously we all love each other and we're buddies, but at the same time there has to be a little tiny fake sense of professionalism or exigence to actually just keep us on track, and having like a refined shooting schedule and working around everyone's days, even though it was still kind of lingering COVID time when, things were, but sophomore year gets really busy. And so I think I just remember finishing the film and having just such a complete sense of satisfaction. Whereas with Smile, when I finished it, I think I just didn't know I didn't know what to think of it. I didn't know if it was like good or what. There was nothing to validate me. And I remember being pretty sad, and my mom was like, no, Colin, you just gave birth to your project and you're going to feel emotional. And she says that every time I finish a film. And yeah, but I did think with Out of My Mind, it was emotional, but also I just remember being like, whatever the film looks like, I'm very proud of how I managed it, the times we had, and the memories of creating the film.
That's really cool. And then you go on the next year and you submit a music video. I know music is a huge part of your life. I love that we have that connection. Why music video? Why was that like, you're a junior in high school and you're like, all right, my next thing, I'm going to do a music video. Is it a relief from the pressure of Out of My Mind and that writing process? And, what made you go that direction?
A little bit, in a way. I think around that time was when I started when Jerry and I, my buddy, we started the film club at our high school, and we started getting a community together, because there was a video program at school, but there's not a sense of people who are interested in filmmaking rather than production and television. So I think around that time, one of my buddies, RC Avenue, who has gone on to amazing successes today as an artist. I think he has 200K monthly listeners on Spotify now, and has really made it. But at work, like he just reached out and was like, hey, I would love to work with you and do a video. And I think there was a sense of relief, because music videos they're definitely, it's a shorter process. And so that is more gratifying first of all. And it's fun because you have the song, which is kind of, you get to be a little creative with how you shoot against it. But I remember everyone in the club, they wanted to make music videos. They didn't want to make it. They didn't want to go through the process of writing and producing short films, because it's such a different process. And so I think while I was making some shorts at the time, that maybe I just wasn't submitting to festivals, I think that video was like, okay, this is going to be my next thing that I'm going to tackle. And I'm really glad I did, because that opened a lot of doors for other artists in the area that I also shot videos for, which was a very, very good experience. And also, just love music. And I think the most visceral images I get in my head is when I'm walking around, headphones on, just hearing the song over and over again. And I wish I had said this earlier, but with Smile, I had these scenes mapped out to the songs way before I shot the film, and it was like I can't not have it in there. There was Radar Love by Golden Earring and Wicked Games, and I just remember hearing that over and over again and just seeing it so viscerally. And so I think when I was hearing RC's music, I was like, okay, I see exactly what's going to happen.
It's fun. The first question I wrote down when we started talking, because I didn't even know, by the way, that you were studying solely music in Spain, which I love. Do it your way, man, and you definitely are, and I love that. But my first thing I wrote down was how does music and what you're doing in music inform what you're doing as a filmmaker? And you're basically answering it. I don't even need to ask the question. You're also the master, by the way, of finding copyright-free versions of copyrighted songs. Because I'm watching Smile again yesterday, and I'm like, wait a minute, like this is still on YouTube. We haven't gotten a flag on this. These are clearly copyrighted songs, but you find these like obscure versions that don't get flagged and are totally legit. So I don't know how you do it, but you need to do a master class for our entire community on how the heck you find these songs. While we're discussing your roots and your path, which is unconventional in kind of the best way, I feel like it's a good time to bring up a specific period of your artistic journey. I don't know if you remember, but we talked right after you won the big award, and we had a really cool conversation, and I was like trying to explain to you like what a big deal it was to win Best Overall Film and how talented I thought you were, and what I wanted you to just to continue to pursue your passion. And then I ran into you a few years later at another convention, and you were going through like something. You're like, I don't know if I'm going to continue with filmmaking. And I have to admit, my heart was broken. Of course, I understand. It's really hard. And I completely respected if you wanted to go away from it. But in my heart, I was like, Colin, I've seen a lot, and you've got that thing. And if anyone's going to keep doing this, I want it to be you. What made you kind of drift away a little bit from the pursuit of this passion? And you found your way back. So there's a happy ending to the story.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, there was definitely a kind of a burnout period, just not just in my passion, but I think just in life in general. I think the period of starting to talk about schools and figure out where you're going to go and where you're going to study is always just daunting, especially if you're someone who wants to go study arts. That's always a conversation that I think a lot of people have with their families, where it kind of goes from, oh, this is my dream, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, to, oh, wait a second, I got to reassess what that actually will look like.
How are you going to make money and have dental benefits and these things? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what's crazy is I actually had a very different experience than most, where my parents, they're like, you have to do film. Like they knew, they were saying they knew, and I think they've always believed in me more than I ever believed in myself, and they've always been such proponents. And so I think it was just a a tough time where I was dealing with some personal stuff. I grown up with kind of an early form of juvenile arthritis, which was really, really limiting for a lot of my physical and social ability up until I was about 13, when I was actually diagnosed. Which, by the way, there's hundreds of thousands of young people in the United States who have undiagnosed arthritis and chronic pain that is kind of goes undiscovered, and the research for it is very, it's frugal. And so I just wanted to put that out there before I talk about it. But I think
this was also when you were going through this, is also the first time you told me about your condition.
Yeah.
And I will never forget that conversation, by the way. I think we were like in passing at this big convention, and we had about 15 minutes, and it was just revelatory. I learned so much about you, and my love for you grew so much in that moment, because you also mentioned, like, Tom, you have to understand, I remember you're like, modern medicine saved my life, like changed my life. Once I was diagnosed, everything changed, and I was just so happy for you. And I kind of understood like how you became the artist you are. And I guess I'm glad that you brought it up, because that has really informed you as a creator, hasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, the way it's informed my life is something that I discover, negative and positive ways almost every day. But when I was first struggling with it, there were times when I wasn't able to go to school, and I think overall I was it's something you wear out, and I think a lot of people who have chronic pain, you can't even see it, but I think for me, I definitely had a noticeable limp in an altercation, and so that was very alienating. And then I think when the diagnosis finally happened, and I was able to find, because there were a bunch of different diseases that they thought I might have had, like scoliosis and whatever, and I was trying all these different things, and it was so frustrating for me and my family, just because it's like, what is going on? We need answers. When I was finally put on a weekly injection, the pain stopped within a week, and that was, I couldn't comprehend what that felt like, and it was just from there a matter of getting 13 years of muscles that hadn't really been used, and kind of getting up to speed, and what that that was a really difficult and long process, but by the time I was a freshman, I was seriously relishing in what that felt like. And I think
confidence just must have been soaring. You're like a whole different person.
Yeah, and it just kind of informed me that there was so much more hope, and discovering the natural world. I was like, I can't get enough of this. I remember I ran a mile every day for 2 months at one point, and I was biking constantly, and sometimes almost 100 miles a week at one point. Because I was just like addicted to being able to move, and it's something I tell everyone is like, we're hustling everywhere, and in our daily lives, we forget that our legs it's walking even is such a mindless task. But for me, that was not something that was in the cards. I was, every step was kind of a challenge before that, but then kind of getting that freedom, I think, it took me years to realize, I think that's what Smile was really about, was that freedom. And it's like I had no idea that there was this catharsis of being released from it, this monotonous black and white cycle into discovering nature, and it's massive, and everything just clicks.
And that's the only option I didn't mention in the introduction, but I knew it, and but I didn't know it when I first watched it. I only knew it because I got to know you, and it's like, he's coming out of the black and white, the legs are coming out of stiffness to movement, and so awesome, man. And I love also that even that, right? You just admitted it. It's unintentional, but it's there. That's the subtext. Yeah. This revelation of change in your life, and we didn't know it. You didn't know it, but somehow it's there and it's communicated. And look, let's be honest about Smile. It's not a perfect film. I mean, you're in ninth grade. It's the most perfect ninth grade film anyone will ever make. I'm making this statement because it comes from this place that's so much richer. And when we were watching it when it first came through, we saw that, And I hope that anyone who hasn't seen it will watch it and have an elevated appreciation for it because of so much going into it. A pandemic, just being young, all of these changes in your life. It's a magical thing, and I'm really grateful for it, for the record.
Oh wow! I'm so glad that it's touched you and however many people have connected with the film, but because for me and my family, I think just looking back on it, my mom talks about it a lot and kind of just is marvels. Look, this was kind of you just getting out what you've become, and it's not something you realize, but it really, I think any art or any out of this world idea comes from a place of a summation of all of your aesthetic interest mixed with your personal experience. And you might not know where it comes from. It might just hit you. And honestly, I never know where my ideas come from until probably later. But I really think it's just when you become a storyteller, which I think everyone is, and when you hone that in, it's your way of processing your life and the world. And so that when I kind of had that realization, I realized what filmmaking kind of meant to me, and it just took it to a whole nother level.
And getting a real sense of your complete arc and the decisions that you're making, and being at Emerson, and the freedom for you to continue to be sort of the kind of storyteller you are, and the fact that we all have a sandbox for putting the sand in. Some of us just decide to take the opportunity to shape it. I'm glad that you've taken that opportunity. To segue all the way back to what got us on this path was, this time in your life where you just weren't maybe sure, you're a little burnt out, but you're back, and that's amazing. So let's talk about that. Now that you've had these experiences in high school, you got over the hump, you decide to go to Emerson. Where do you go from here?
Yeah, so it was a big fresh start. Senior year was tough and dealing kind of with some of the aftermath of. I know that we just went on that tangent, but really what I was trying to say was a lot of it was kind of dealing with a lot of the mental repercussions of that period of time and kind of a lot of unrealized traumas and
100%. Yeah.
You
couldn't do things that everyone else was doing, right? And insecurities and all these things that build up.
Yeah. So that summer was the summer before school. Kind of a switch flipped in my head, and I became very hopeful. But also, I just remember not having huge expectations. I was like, okay, I'm going to this new place, but I just came from a point where for a year and a half, I was like, I can't make another movie. I just feel like I'm not good enough. I'm not meant to do that. I'm not meant to be in that place. And I just remember there was this feeling of whatever happens, and I'm willing to put in the work. And I think when you're down for that long, it's your body resting and getting ready to take the next step. And so I really felt like when I got there, I was like, almost within weeks, I was reaffirmed that this is where I should be, and I'm ready to just do the work. And from there, I think there was no expectation of what's the next project going to be. which I'm glad there wasn't until I found out about this, the Emerson Independent Video, which is Emerson's student-run production company, which is the largest in the nation, by the way, which is a good flex for them. And I was like, they're taking screenplays. I have a goal. I'm gonna try and get my film in there, and see what happens. And drawing from learning about some music culture in Boston and just kind of my general joy of being there, it became probably definitely my most joyous and upbeat film, which is Silly Love Songs, which is coming out very, very shortly. It's in its festival run.
What's the log line? Can you tell us?
The log line. It's about a timid singer-songwriter who develops a crush on the host of a desperate Boston radio station, and it's their love story.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a fun one. It's different than anything I'd done before, and I think it was just a great, totally different experience in making a film. Shot in one weekend, produced by the student production company. All these restrictions, a 25-30 person crew. And it totally different. And you know what? I think it's my least perfect film, and I'm so grateful for that. The most messy production like ever, which was I just learned so much from doing that.
You learn more from the mistakes and the things that you can reflect on looking back than all of the successes, for sure.
Yeah.
So let me ask about this specific project, because wow, what a leap. And congratulations. First of all, I would imagine it was pretty competitive. What was the hardest part of working with such a big crew and a more complex production than anything that you've done?
Totally. I think the hardest part that I recall, and it doesn't seem difficult to me now, but was just kind of asking people for favors. I remember not feeling very comfortable with even texting someone asking to set up a meeting. I was like, oh my God, I don't want to, take away from your day, like pathologically kind California person. I don't want to intrude on these people's lives, but then kind of realizing like everyone is there to help you, and wants to see you succeed, and which is what I love about Emerson. And so ultimately that crew that came on board, I just remember shaking, texting the crew group chats and being like, can we schedule it? Can we do this? And can PD do this? And I remember being so timid about wanting to order people around, because it's really not, I think I possess, the ability to direct, but I also, am a reserved person and really struggled with kind of communicating.
But what you learn in the process is that you're not ordering people around, you're being assertive and you're organizing people.
Totally.
Yep.
And I think there's such a difference from being a jerk and bossing people around to just telling, like, being assertive and realizing, like, that's just how the world kind of is you can't get something done by being like, take your time, whatever.
Sure.
So I just really grew in like confidence, kind of seeing it all come together, and I'll never forget the weeks leading up to that, kind of that joyous feeling of being like, wow, this is really going to come together. And I think the most satisfying part of a film is the shooting, but then also the couple weeks leading up where you kind of go autopilot, and it's like, I remember feeling like, oh, the script is out of my hands. People are working, on their own time. I'm not telling them what to do. They're just getting it done. And that was just such a cool feeling.
So, I could keep talking about this stuff forever. I'm really glad. And by the way, please let me be one of the first to get that very private link that I will never show to anyone, but I really want to see before most people do. Remember, not too long ago, I had the pleasure of inviting you to join me and a bunch of alumni in Milan, Italy, for the 2030 festival. Can you tell me about that experience and what it was like to be around other alumni from the festival, sort of all in a strange place, getting together to talk about social impact filmmaking and just kind of, I don't know, I found it to be very a spiritually creative experience, just being around all these people who love to do the same thing.
Yeah.
You probably get that a little bit more than I do, but what was that experience like?
Yeah, well, first of all, that was genuinely such a privilege and honor to be there and be attending, and also meeting a lot of the alumni, which I was kind of familiar with, some of their films, and being maybe a little intimidated by like, oh, this person won this award, and are they going to be like really scary? Are they gonna talk down on me? And I think the craziest part was, first of all, learning that these were incredibly down to earth and kind people who are also talented filmmakers, but then going and seeing some of the films that were there, which are just explore every, difficult kind of gripping aspect of the human experience. A lot
from all over the world, literally from all over the world.
Yeah. A lot of challenging watches, a lot of very intense watches, and a lot of ideas that are kind of out of my scope of understanding and my, because of my ignorance of just not having lived that long. And I think not only seeing what kind of, how people can make films that are not only, very funny or entertaining, but also, social justice impactful, but then just also meeting the people behind some of the films. It's just, you kind of you think someone's going to be a certain way when you see their project, and or at least I do. And I was always met with kindness and always met with humility, because, maybe the stuff that I'm producing is not at that level quite yet, but there's a sense of, camaraderie with these people who are really pushing these messages and wanting to change the world. So it was so humbling, and also like so inspiring, and doing the workshops, getting to meet a lot of Nicole and Sydney and a lot of the people behind the festival too, and that really brought me closer to understanding the festival that changed my life and made me into the person who I am today. So I just was so grateful to have that experience, bonding with you guys, but then also just getting to get my mind kind of blown open and seeing a lot of films that were just, wow, I didn't know, that this was possible, or this was happening, or that people were, it was totally out there.
I completely agree, and that's how I feel about it as well, and I'm grateful for it. I hope it's something that we can continue to do. And I wanted to ask, because I want people to hear it and say, I want to be a part of that, because it's hard. It's a hard thing to quantify. Let's all go to Milan for a social impact festival randomly. I'm telling you, it's going to change your life. I appreciate what you just said about All American, and in your case, more than I think maybe anyone else, I do get the sense that your success with us when you were so young was life-changing. But yet I've also gotten to see some of the ups and downs that are a very real part of any artistic journey. And I'm just glad to be a part of it, Colin. I mean, like, I usually ask right here, like, what did your recognition mean? I don't think I need to ask you that, because I've gotten to experience it at stages, and I have this sense that I'm going to get to experience many more stages with you. And I don't know if that means as a filmmaker, as someone working behind the scenes with the festival a little more, as a musician, but I'm happy to have been on this journey with you from such an early start, and I'm so excited to see what comes next for you. What do you think that means? What's next for Colin Dowse? Where do you want to go?
Wow. Well, Tom, first of all, that makes my heart so happy. That I'm so grateful for our relationship, and I totally agree. Whatever stages they might be, because honestly, I have a lot of things in the works. There's a new film that I'm producing that's gonna hopefully be my biggest project to date. That for my thesis, that is a much more personal one. It's about arthritis, and
is it a documentary?
No,
Okay.
it's sort of a semi autobiographical, if you will. It's about a young boy with juvenile arthritis who meets this old man in physical therapy, and they become best friends. And it's kind of just an enlightening story about it, about a young person's journey with arthritis. It's not dissimilar to mine, but I just felt like something that no one's really seen before. And so there's that. But honestly, like, I being at music school, I love it and I love studying it. And there's a sense that this is always going to be in my life, whatever that looks like, whether or not making a family band or just jamming on.
I mean, here's all my stuff, it's like
you have quite a set back there. I'm admiring
and I don't do anything with it, Colin, but make myself happy. And that's okay.
Totally.
This is my space. And if that's what it is, you'll always have that. But go ahead.
Totally. So I think, that's always going to be in my life, and I think I'm going to be destined to do some sort of movie making no matter what. Whether or not it's, in post-production, which is something that I'm really, really leaning into this far into film school. Is I love editing, and I've always loved visual effects, but being an editor and a post person, but just there's just always I think being in an artistic environment is just where it's always going to be for me. And I think whether that's as a director or as an editor or as a musician, I think as long as I have that catharsis of sharing my feelings through the creative outlet, we'll see where that takes me in film, because honestly, like, I have no idea what I'll be doing when I graduate. And I would hope that I'm, in some sort of post-production job, but then after that, it's like, do I keep writing? Do I keep trying to tell my stories? Because that's what a lot of people want, or, maybe expect or are telling me I should do. But then I'm also like, I really love just helping other people out with their films and kind of taking a more backseat approach. And getting to be an editor and telling the story in a different way. But I think
that's a really practical path as well. It's like, you want to be involved. You're okay with maybe, it's not okay with, you genuinely enjoy a piece of it that can provide a more stable career in post-production. And yet, doesn't mean that the other stuff isn't going to be a part of that journey as well moving forward.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, there's, whether or not I make it as a writer director, that kind of doesn't matter to me. As long as I make it to a place where I'm, stable, like, I'm always going to want to create things. And whether or not that's what all that I do, or it's just kind of something on the side, I think I wouldn't live with myself if I wasn't, writing my own movies and producing them. So it's just, I think that's always going to be there, whether or not that is the dominant thing that I do. And I think that what's so great about the film industry, especially when you're going independent, which as I hope to do, is like, you kind of get that freedom of you make way to create your own passion projects, and that never starts with being a full-time director. I don't think anyone's ever. Yeah, there's a couple like crazy instances that maybe have happened like recently, but it's just like, nah. Like, there's gonna be so much time, and I think I need that time to continue learning and creating new experiences that I may draw into my stories, because I just think So we'll see what happens.
I love it, and my next question was going to be, what advice do you have for our community? But I think you just gave it, and I think you provide an excellent example, for anyone who's part of the All-American community listening to this and saying, well, I'm at one of those stages that Colin's been at, or, I'm following him in this way. And I think your positivity is contagious. I think your exploratory openness is contagious. I hope you never lose it. I'm so happy, again, for all of the pieces of your experience that I was privy to. I'm so happy to see that this is where you ended up, and I sense a very bright future. I want to leave everyone with a question I always like to ask, and I'm particularly curious here with just some recommendations. This is like a selfish thing I do at the end of every interview, so I get some ideas, of course, but just curious, what are you into right now? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Give us a glimpse into the world and some recommendations that we can check out to understand you as an artist and your appreciation for the arts.
Wow, yeah. So I've been into okay. So first of all, I've always been more of a music listener than a film watcher, and I think people will ask me like, what are some of the films that you're watching, and I'll go and see them. Try to see what's in the pop culture. I've been watching Severance, which is fantastic, so I'll recommend that. But I think I think more so is I'm always consuming new music. Right now I'm on a 70s progressive rock, kind of Genesis, Mike Oldfield, the Moody Blues, that kind of era, which is totally inspiring me right now. I don't know how that'll translate if that will translate into a creative project, but that is to me what I'm obsessed with. Like I cannot get enough of that. And I just think, I'm also just on getting those life experiences. I totally recommend that anyone go out and just try to study abroad if it's possible. Even if you are taking kind of a break from the work you're doing. And honestly, I feel a little bit out of touch with a lot of what's going on back home, and a lot of the culture, and I feel kind of behind, and a lot of my friends back home have to update me because I'm just so, immersed in new things and new cultures. And I think this is probably the best thing I could be consuming right now. So while I wish I could give more like TV or movie recommendations, I think right now I'm just kind of in my own world here, just kind of living it out. So I hope everyone gets a chance to do some sort of traveling like this.
I mean, if your current state of life is your inspiration, I don't think you could ask for much more. So that is the answer that I've always wanted to hear from someone like you, and it makes my heart incredibly full. I want to thank you, Colin, for an insightful glimpse into your experiences and motivations as a storyteller. I encourage everyone to fall in love with Colin like I have by checking out links to his impressive body of work in the description. And thanks to all of you, of course, for tuning in and joining us. I remind you that this is just one of many in-depth conversations with the future of film. You can go to hsfilmfest.com for more information on the All-American High School Film Festival, and please subscribe and share across all platforms to support our important community of artists that, as you can see, start very young, and we hope to see all of you next time. Colin, thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a good one.